All right, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of things, and I think I'll tell you exactly what happened with one of my sales calls today, and I think it's going to be a pretty interesting case study for you to understand how when you actually pull back when a prospect is being difficult, how that actually contributes potentially to the sale, potentially no sale, but you want to be able to distance yourself from somebody who is being very aggressive. So if somebody's moving forward, you want to basically, pull back, right? Because the most important part is for you not to feel like you need to be the dancing monkey and dance to their tune. Because if you do that, you basically fall into their frame and what they want you to do. And when you do that, you basically lose control of the conversation. Now, you think that you may be giving them what they want, but you lose control over your own flow, right? Over your own proactive decisions that you would make otherwise, because now you've just basically fallen into their frame and you're conceding and you're making concessions and you're acquiescing to their demands, and all of that is going to be very damaging in the long term, not only for your own psychology, for your own well-being, but also for the sale itself. Before we get there, let's actually talk about a couple of things that I wanted to discuss, because we had a very interesting sales meeting today, where we discussed a couple of concepts that I want to basically outline for you, because I think they're going to be very helpful. I'm going to go through them and I might expand on some of the key points that I think are going to be pertinent, but I think these are all going to be very helpful. So let's go through this together. So first point here, you must first lead yourself well in order to lead others well. So you can lead yourself kind of, and you can kind of lead others. You could say something, they might listen, and then the next moment they won't. But the idea is, especially when you're leading prospects, you're basically taking them through a process, right? From beginning to end. Now that process, you could take many different pathways to get the same outcome. So it's like, this is your end point, this is your starting point, and you can exercise different options to get to the same outcome. So you can lead them in some capacity, in some way of the path, but once they kind of lose that feeling of trust that they have with you, or they don't feel like you're a leader, they're going to stop following, and it's going to prevent you from actually getting to where you want to get to. So you must lead the prospect on the call and handle the changes and challenges that arise. As I just said, that allows them to feel like they're in good hands, right? That they trust you, that they feel like you are not, quote unquote, the authority, as people say, but you have expertise, right? You have knowledge, you have more knowledge than they have, but you also need to present it in such a way where they're actually going to resonate with it. And you have to be very careful. Like, sometimes you can come across the wrong way. I know sometimes I can come across the wrong way. I can come across as sometimes a little bit too brash, or maybe sometimes a little bit arrogant without intending to, but I could see how that may come across. So I have to kind of scale back with the way I say things and my tonality. And the reason I haven't talked about tactics at this point is because what I say may not necessarily be what you would say in the same in different cases, depending on what you're selling, right? So it's almost like, what are you selling? What product or service are you selling? And who are you talking to? And what is your personality? Who are you as a person? So all of these factors come into play. And I'll talk about some tactics down the line, but let's continue here. So another analogy that was given was the sword or the pen analogy, i.e., so that is to say, use the tool that is appropriate to the situation. And that basically refers to what I just talked about. You can't use the same tool for every situation because it's not going to work every time. So if you think that you have this talk track that you're using, so this kind of phrase that typically lands with parents, you can use it. Typically, those phrases do tend to land, and I do believe in phrases depending on the product or service that you're selling. Around that particular product or service, you have to be able to develop phrases that actually land very well with your prospects ubiquitously. So what I found in my specific offers is that there are certain key things that I say that get a lot of head nods, right? So every time you get a lot of head nods, this is a quick tip for you. Every time you get a lot of head nods, somebody agrees with you, make a mental note of it. In fact, you can make a physical note as well, so you can use that same phrasing in future meetings. That would be very helpful. And then you can see you're going to begin to stack on those developments, and to the point where you're going to get just a bunch of head nods and agreements. And sometimes that won't happen, and you have to like adjust your strategy. But there should be certain things that you say that may or may not be scripted. Eventually, what typically does happen is that you'll say something off the cuff, and it'll sound so good and it'll resonate with that person, and you just say it again on your next call, and then eventually that becomes like a habit that you're used to employing. And what you'll notice is that typically when you do that, you'll get a large percent of the prospects that you talk to, maybe like 80% or 90%, to agree with you in some capacity, either give you an affirmative yes or nod their head, or it'll land in some way. So moving on here, your locus of control, we might be kind of all over the place, but I think this is going to be very important. Your locus of control must be internal, therefore do not blame or skirt responsibility. If you do that, you've submitted that a person slash situation has power over you. So retain your power by adopting responsibility for whatever happens. If you're stressed about outcomes, which are out of your control, you may be forgetting about the inputs, which are within your control, which you need to focus on. So this is very interesting because I can fall into this trap sometimes as well, which is that you think about what happened and you think about who's responsible. And you may actually be correct in thinking or believing or even knowing that you are not responsible for what happened. It's not your fault. Here's the kicker, right? Here's the distinction. Although you are not responsible for what has occurred, maybe, right? Maybe you are in some way. If you are even a little bit of way, just take full responsibility because it's a lot easier. And then it's a lot easier to like cross the bridge of, oh, I contributed in some way to this problem. Therefore, let me make sure that I don't do that again, as opposed to pointing fingers. It's like, if it was even 1% or 2% or whatever the case is, just take that responsibility because it'll help you teach yourself a lesson, right? So you're going to be able to learn in the future so that you don't make the same mistake again. That way you can remove all the rest. So if 98% is not your responsibility, you have 2% that was. So focus on that 2%, focus on what you need to do better, and then just kind of discard the rest. But aside from that, there may be situations where you may be wholly not at fault for what happened or whatever the case is. The best thing that you can do is just take responsibility over what you do as a consequence of that situation, which means you're basically responsible for how you respond. And so you don't want to respond with accusations or judgments or criticisms or anything like that. What you want to do is you want to make the analysis in your own mind, in your own head, so that you know how to deal with the situation moving forward. So you can kind of talk it out with yourself, and then you can come to some conclusion where you're not really blaming anybody else, but you're just kind of leaving things as they are, and then deciding that you are going to make a decision to put yourself in a better position or make the situation a little bit better in whatever capacity that you can. So that's important to do. Outcomes, here's another point here. Outcomes it's a little bit tied into the previous point. Outcomes can sometimes be predicted, but not controlled. So hedge your activities through your inputs to do everything you can do, i.e. your actions. Desired outcomes come from consistent, focused attention to proper inputs. So that is basically a reiteration of what I just said. Next point, did you do everything right? So a lot of these points are related, as you can tell. Did you do everything right to the best of your ability? Did you actually try? If you did everything that was required to obtain the outcome, regardless of the result, then you are building your habits and character to be aligned with those outcomes. This is very important. You can't control what happens. You can control what you do. And so you also know, and I think, you've heard a lot of these self-help individuals and other professionals in various industries talk about when you see somebody doing something and you repeat that pattern, there's a reliable probability that you will achieve the same result if you do it for a long enough period of time in the way that they've spelled it out in a way. Now, sometimes you don't have to do it exactly to the T, but keep in mind that, I'll just say it, right? Tony Robbins said, "Success leaves clues." That phrase popped into my head, and I think it sounds very glib on the surface, but really it's true, right? Because the clues that success is leaving, it's just leading you down a path that somebody else has walked before. So if you pick up on the clues and you do some of the same activities, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Feasible, probable, I suppose, that you're going to get to the same outcome or approach that outcome over time if you continue to iterate it and do the right things. So I'm trying to think of some examples. It's pretty late here. It's not as late as it was yesterday. Yesterday was like 12:40, and I don't know how my brain was working at that time. Now it's only 10:20 p.m. Eastern time. You could see CIBC right there. If I could figure out the way to point right there. That's the downtown Toronto. So um, you're doing something consistently in such a way where you're not copying or mimicking, but you are modeling another person's behavior. There's a good word for you. Modeling another person's behavior insofar as you want to achieve the same result they've achieved. Hence why there are courses, hence why there are books, hence why there are instructional manuals, hence why there are how-tos, because people have done it before. So if you do what people have done before, then you can reliably expect to get the same result. Obviously, you have to make your own modifications, and you have to take situational factors into consideration as well, and personal factors as well, but you get the point. That was a long time for me to harp on. I could have said that in 5 seconds, but let's continue here. Ensure that you follow the process you've outlined, everything, i.e. everything required to create a feedback loop of improvement so that you stop relying on the beneficial consequences of that process, i.e. your confidence, charisma, positive mindset, etc. I'm going to break all this down for a second. Once you've dissociated from the process, you will regress over time because it is the process that you use to get there. So basically, you're concentrating on the fruits of your labor. In fact, Stephen Covey's book is right there, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has this concept called PPC, which is like production and production capacity, which is the difference between the golden goose and the golden goose that lays the golden eggs, right? So if you focus too much on the actual the actual outcome itself, you're going to neglect what produces the outcome, which is your process. So what that means is that if you start to say you're on your sales calls, you start to feel more confident, you know, you have more charisma, like I mentioned before, you have like this really good mindset, and everything is going well. Now, if you're in that state currently and you think that you could just turn it on every time, you may be a rare individual, maybe like top like 0.5% individual who could just tap into things and just do things without a process. That's pretty rare. I don't even know what the percentages of that would be. However, keep one thing in mind is that your process is what got you there. You didn't just magically get there. So a good example is how I like to start my day in general. I don't do a long morning routine, but I still try to do a morning routine if I have time, if I'm not taking calls early in the morning. The routine consists of the following, and I'll talk about this and I'll expand all about it in future videos. But a quick memo, a voice memo, a quick journal, quick meditation sessions, sometimes and sometimes I don't, depending on how I'm feeling on the day. There's a lot of gratitude involved in that entire process. And then I'll take a shower. I'll end with cold water just to like wake my body up. It's not really this whole cold shower thing or whatever, just to wake myself up because I'm pretty groggy in the morning in general. So when I do that, I actually am able to kick my day off in the right way. I prime myself. You prime yourself for the day. This is another concept that Tony Robbins talks about as far as priming is concerned. But it's the same thing with every process. This is not some kind of magical thing. Like, what do you do in the morning to get ready? You know, you get up, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you put your clothes on. If you're going to some location, maybe you'll pick up some food on the way, or you'll drink your coffee, or you're going to intermittent fast or whatever. That's a process, right? Because you're looking to attain some kind of benefit from the things that you're doing. So if you want to attain that benefit, you still have to do the things to attain the benefit. So which means that you might be able to just focus on the benefit for 1 or 2 days or 3 days or maybe a week at, who knows how long, but over time that's going to fade if you don't continue to do the process. So if you're seeing good results, say for example, oh, look, you've lost a lot of weight, you're in shape, you're great. Are you going to wake up one day and say, now I'm just going to eat whatever I want because now I've attained this body, and so now I feel comfortable and now I will just do whatever I want? No, of course not. That sounds ridiculous. You still have to go through a process. So if you got to that point by, say, for example, eating 3 square meals a day, they're all very healthy meals. You have X amount of protein, X amount of fat, X amount of carbs. You work out you have a specific workout routine that you employ, and whatever else you do that has gotten you there. If you stop doing all those things, then it's very reasonable to assume that you would not obtain the actual result itself. So that's a long-winded way of saying focus on the process, not on the result, because the result will come as a result of the process. So A couple last points here and then I'll wrap it up. Focus on becoming better, but also focus on becoming less worse. Build an analysis on where you're weak, i.e., that is to say, what you need to stop doing, which is not helping you. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about this, which is basically if you don't know what to do to actually help yourself, and I think I stumbled across this by accident some time ago, many years ago, which is that you don't have unlimited space to continue adding positive habits. So one of the first things that you can do is just find out what are the negative habits that you have, or what are the things that you're doing that are not helping you that you can just stop doing. So if you don't know what to start doing, there are some things that you're doing that you know are not conducive to whatever outcome you're trying to achieve or whatever state that you're trying to embody or whatever the case is. So it's not always trying to add more to your plate. Like, what do I have to do? Like, what can I add? It's sometimes what do I need to stop doing, right? How can I become less worse? What are the things that I'm doing that's causing me to fall into specific traps? So lesson here is sometimes it's not about adding more, and maybe in the context of sales, adding more to your pitch, adding more explanations, adding more points. It's about removing, right? Leaving space. That's why they talk about strategic pauses, right? When you pause strategically, it has an effect. You're leaving space. You're not just talking. Right now I'm talking because I'm just talking to a video. I'm talking to a screen. I'm talking to you, right? But I'm not talking to a person who is going to be engaging with me directly in this moment. So pauses, right? You're removing the words, right? You're taking things away. You're stopping things. You're removing things that are not helping, right? So you can create more space for that space to maybe be filled with, other positive habits or other positive consequences as a result of that space. So in the context of a prospect, you leave some space. It gives him or her space to think about what you're saying, as opposed to you bulldozing them with your information, like what I'm doing right now, bulldozing you with my information. All right, final point here. You can get the same results, better be recording. You can get the same results without stress if you manage your inputs to be fully optimized. Sometimes you can confuse stress with positive outcomes because you're mobilizing more mental resources to obtain those outcomes. Whereas if you managed your state better, you could have produced the same results without the high stress. So this is just basically the concept of believing that you have to be a certain way in order for you to achieve a certain thing, whatever that happens to be. So the point that we were just making there is essentially, if you think that you need to be in a specific state, the state of stress for you to achieve something. Now, obviously, you're mobilizing, you're releasing cortisol, adrenaline, and obviously these things are beneficial. Like they wake you up, they allow you to actually think better. That is actually all true. But sometimes that stress could be a very reactive stress. Like you allow yourself to basically fall or get sucked into the stress, as opposed to doing things that are going to help you raise your level of energy to the point where you can get things done, but you're not feeling the stress that you would feel if you were just reactive to the situation. So basically about state management, and if you manage your state properly, you can get as much done, if not more, than if you were just to wait for the stress to come and then try to like act in thinking that it's because of the stress that you got the outcomes. The stress helped you out because of what was producing in your body, but you could achieve that state doing different things. So I'll leave it there. I hope that was helpful. I don't know how long we've been going, but yeah, guys, appreciate you watching the video once again. And if you like it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and then more coming your way soon.